I'm a pretty big anime fan, but there's always been one show that everyone talks about that I just never got into, and that's One Piece.
One Piece!
I watched a little bit when I was about 13 years old, but I think I stopped right around when Mihawk first arrived. I think I was just way more interested in Naruto at that time, so I didn't keep going with One Piece. For whatever reason, I started getting recommended a lot of videos on my YouTube feed for Netflix's live adaptation for One Piece. Whether that was trailers or interviews or just fun little moments with the cast.
Oh man, that gave me goosebumps,
And I don't know why, but I started getting more and more interested in watching this show just because of the main 5 crew members. They just seemed to have this passion and friendship that made me want to start watching. I was a little hesitant though, just because I've seen some not so great live action anime adaptations, like with Avatar: The Last Airbender and also Netflix's Death Note. But I think because I'm not as familiar with One Piece and I don't know all the differences between the characters and the story beats, I just wanted to see if the show would still hold up as a regular viewer. And also, I was kind of looking for an excuse to get into One Piece, so I figured, why not? And also, just a heads up, there will be some spoilers in this video just due to the nature of reviewing the whole first season. So let's get started. I've got to say right off the bat, if you aren't somewhat interested in anime, this show isn't really going to be for you. It's not Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad levels of quality. It's a relatively goofy show, so you need to be on board with that type of aesthetic and non-realism. But if you do watch some anime, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by this show. I haven't watched a ton of live action adaptations, but this is easily the best one I've seen. A large part of that comes from the manga's author being extremely involved with the project. Every major decision had to go through him, the biggest decision being the casting, which I think they absolutely nailed. Like I said, I didn't get very far in One Piece, but I do remember roughly how the characters acted and the dynamic between the crew. Each main crew member, villain, and most supporting cast members were casted great in my opinion. Some give stronger performances than others, but that's to be expected with this many characters that are on screen.
You can't do this! You can't do this!
Luckily though, the main character Luffy is great. He just exudes this high level of positivity and you can't help but smile most of the time that he's on screen. Zoro was a little less energetic than I remember. He feels more monotone in this than in the anime.
Nami, I think the toilet's busted.
We don't have a toilet.
Oh, well then something back there is leaking.
What?
But he still has some great moments, especially this early fight scene in the bar. It's probably one of the best choreographed fight scenes in the whole show. There's this weight to each blow as Zoro just finesses everyone in the room. I also like that we got to actually see him collect a bounty on a pirate. He's always referenced as a pirate hunter, but we never actually got to see him do that before meeting Luffy in the anime. Also, the actress for Nami was also a great cast. I feel like she really filled the character's shoes and brought this character to life. I wasn't as familiar with her character because I didn't see her arc later on in the anime, so as a first-time viewer, it was really exciting to not know whose side she was on until the very end. And I also really like Sanji as well, way more than I remember in the anime. Him and Zeph were definitely some of my favorites by far. Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Sanji all have pretty incredible backstories that are some of the real highlights for this show. I feel like Usopp didn't quite get enough screen time or explanation for me personally. I think his backstory could have had a greater impact if they just presented it maybe slightly different. He's also a character that I didn't like as much in the anime, but that might just be how his character is in the very beginning of the show. I don't know how he turns out later, but I still feel like the actor who played him did a great job. I was just hoping for his character to maybe be a little more involved. I just don't feel like he gets as much love as the other 4 in terms of overall impact in this adaptation, but I think that's just the nature of the show. With Luffy being the main character, Luffy's the one that helps each of the other 4 overcome their own personal struggles to be able to grow and move on from their past. And switching over to the dark side, I want to highlight the villains who were just great in this. Buggy and Arlong were awesome. They both felt like they were these larger-than-life characters and really fit the anime vibe while still working in a live-action setting. Buggy's episode was by far one of my favorites, and he also had one of the strongest performances in the whole show, and I feel like he had a ton of fun with his own character. Arlong was also a pleasant surprise for me. I didn't quite get to his arc in the anime, so when he first shows up, I thought he was just some strong, angry brute character by the way he walks in, but he has this presence and confidence about him that I love. I think he's just a really interesting character. And also, Mihawk was really cool in this.
One moment.
His costuming and design are amazing. Some characters kind of feel like a cosplayer that are in the show, but he felt like a real anime character that was brought to life. Unfortunately, Clahador, the butler, was probably the weakest villain of the show, but I think that's just because we didn't get much setup for him as a character. The show has to move pretty quickly, and unfortunately, he gets fleshed out probably the least. I also didn't really understand his power. They don't really explain it, and he sort of just teleports around the room. And at first, Luffy can't really hit him, and then all of a sudden, he can just hit him. I don't know. But I really love some of the shots of him walking around the estate, slowly scratching the walls or the glass while doing his monologue. But his fight was probably the weakest in the show for me. Another area that needs to be praised for this show is the atmosphere and just overall aesthetic. The ships look great, the locations and the towns also look great, and the fishmen were pretty good. And some of the ability shots were actually really awesome. Like here when Luffy stretches all the way back, I love that we see the follow through after hitting Alvida off the ship. It just has this extra impact to it that I love. I also like that they included unique title cards for each episode that allude to who's going to be the focus of the episode. They could have just had one logo and called it a day, but this extra level of detail is just one example of how much work I think the entire crew really put in. There's so much love and attention that went into the show, and they should all be extremely proud. This isn't going to be the next Stranger Things or Squid Game, but it's really good for a live-action anime adaptation. It's fun and pretty well executed. I also really like the bounty posters that show up on screen when introducing new villains. There are these fun little fourth wall break moments where they interact with the poster on screen. This is just one example of how I feel like they've really captured the essence of anime and One Piece when moving over to live action. It's really difficult to sometimes translate that humor or just overall wackiness to live action. And again, I don't know a ton about One Piece, but I still feel like they really nailed the tone of what One Piece probably is, if that makes sense. You can just tell when watching that there's way more things done right than wrong here. This might also be something that isn't worth praising and it's kind of small, but I'm really glad they gave our heroes different clothes to wear. They don't just have one outfit on like in typical anime fashion. And I feel like this makes the world feel a lot more lived in and the characters are actually a part of it, rather than just the actors putting on some cosplay and a wig. In anime, usually characters wear the same outfit for the whole show, except for like a time skip or a new generation. It's just easier for the animators if they only have to worry about one outfit per character. And I think this is actually a small reason why I like Killua from Hunter x Hunter so much, is that he's got more than one fit. But let's get back to One Piece. I will say that my gripes with the show are pretty small and most of them are just some nitpicks, but I will say some of the shots were kind of strange and pull you out of the moment. And for some reason during the Arlong speech, I feel like these cuts are just really off. This isn't edited at all, this is just what it looks like, but it just feels off to me. There's also some of these shots that have this kind of lens effect on the edges that just didn't really make sense. It's not like a character here is impaired or dazed or anything, it's just like this effect where for a couple of shots it looks like this, and then they just don't do it again until the next episode. It's kind of weird. And also I will say the one costume that just didn't work for me is this cat pirate that Zoro fights. His mask just looks like a scuffed Batman cosplay or something, and I don't know, I just could not take this moment serious. If I had to give the show a rating, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10, which for me, that means I'm glad I watched it, but it's unlikely I'm gonna watch it a second time, or at least not for a year or two. Netflix's One Piece is not gonna be the next mainstream hit, and it might only work for certain audiences, but that's okay. I think it's a really fun show to watch, and the time just flew by for me. I was really excited to just keep watching one episode after the next. And for someone who wasn't that interested in One Piece before, I really want to start reading the manga and follow these characters. The stories told in this show are fantastic, and there's some really strong character moments. The pain and anguish some of these characters have to overcome is incredible. And I don't know if another season's gonna come out, but if it does, I'd love to follow the next adventures of this Straw Hat crew. Thank you all so much for watching till the end of the video, and until next time, have a good one.